So in high school, I was very passionate about going to college. I always knew that's what I wanted to do. I had my eyes on the University of Maryland, and I applied my senior year, and I ended up getting in. It was in College Park, but because of my financial situation, I wouldn't be able to afford that. It would be too much stress, and my mother also did not want me to go to college to go live in a four-year school because of she wanted to have a lot of control over me. And I ended up applying to Montgomery College. That's where my brother was at the time due to a baseball scholarship. So around 2019, I had come home. Once I got to the apartment that we were currently living in, I walked into what was a crime scene. My mom was in the middle of the hallway and she looked like a rag doll, and there was blood all over the walls and all over the floor and in the living room, and my dad was on the couch, and I couldn't even recognize them. They had been pretty beaten, and the whole apartment was a mess. And when I walked up to my mom, I first thought that my parents were dead. They looked like they were dead. And so I walked around the entire apartment in chaos, and then I called 911, thinking that I had lost my parents that day. When I saw my mom laying there was a bat next to her. It was a bloody bat, and it was one of my brother's baseball bats. And that's when I knew, when I couldn't find my brother in the apartment, that's when I knew that it had been him that had done this, and he left the scene. I knew that after that night, my life was never going to be the same. I had grown up in a very toxic situation, but then that trauma set aside, and then what had happened, that event, I knew that my life was gonna be completely different. I had to deal with all of my parents' financial situation, their bills, their financial struggles that they were dealing with. Everything was just on my shoulders, and having to deal with my brother being in jail, and having to deal with countless of people in my hometown seeing it on the news and reaching out, or people saying really bad things about my family. It was so much because I was 18. I didn't know how to be an adult. I didn't know how to deal with these things. I mean, it was just very out of the ordinary. I remember I was a student at Montgomery College when this happened. I was in my freshman year of college. Harry Zarin, that he was a counselor that my brother had. He wasn't even my counselor, and he reached out to me saying, "I'm sorry, I'm here for you. Like, if you need anything, how's your brother doing? How are you doing? How are your parents doing?" It was a lot of people from Montgomery College that were genuinely interested in about my well-being and seeing how I was doing.
Prior to the incident, I had no idea that AJ had a sister, specifically a sister at the college. And I found out when the baseball coach called me, filled me in on what happened. And then I figured Nicole's probably going to need somebody to talk to figure out, how do I proceed? Because she's such a young person, and all of a sudden she's now in a position where she's got to take care of everybody. And I think the first thing I did was I wrote to all of her professors and just said that Nicole was going to be dealing with a very tragic situation that occurred in her family. She might be absent a little bit. Give her some flexibility on getting assignments done, on attendance. Keep in touch with me. I didn't describe what occurred. I didn't feel I needed to do that. It was more to kind of set the stage that she might be absent a little bit and she's going to need a little bit of help. Along with that, we put a little money out there for the college. I reached out, because I've been there for so long, I know a lot of people, and I reached out to the foundation and to financial aid to see what we could do to increase the amount of financial aid we might be able to give Nicole to help cover some debt, because we knew that money was going to be an issue in the family. And I don't even know if I told her I ever did that, but that was something we did.
And so in that moment, I really shut everybody out. I isolated myself. I ignored what people told me. I didn't really want to deal with it. And it's because I didn't want to acknowledge the fact that what had happened happened. I didn't want to accept it as my reality. And at that time, mental health really wasn't anything in my mind that I was addressing.
A lot of what we do is just to reach out to them to make sure they know they're not alone. and to be a contact, and to, like I did with Nicole, reach out to the professors to kind of take the load off, to give them some direction. We want them to feel that they're not alone, and check in with them on a regular basis. And that's pretty much what I did with Nicole. I didn't want to appear intrusive. This was a very personal issue for the entire family. But every now and then, it would be an email, it would be a phone call, it would be a text. How are you doing? What can I do for you? Are you able to get to your classes? Do you need me to do anything? What's going on? So it was more check-ins on a regular basis. And that's what I did with her. And I think college-wide, that's probably what our counselors do with all the students who have a trauma, run into this. We have a behavioral intervention team post Virginia Tech. This was a big movement nationwide, and we have behavioral intervention teams on all 3 campuses, and we have the college-wide unit meets and talks, and we do case reviews, and we try to figure out what can we do. Sometimes the situations are so severe, you really do need another set of eyes and ears and brains to work together to come up with what can we do when the situation is so tragic and so dramatic, and it has a profound impact on the student's life.
The more I ignored everything going on up here, the more my grades started to suffer. I started to not do as well. I started to find such difficulty in doing the simplest tasks. That's when the questions started coming, where I was confused and conflicted because I was just hard on myself.
So I felt that the best thing I could do was do some work behind the scenes like I was doing that she never knew about until today, and check in with her on a regular basis and be as supportive as I could, because she did share that academically she's struggling and not having as good a success as a student as she used to have. So my job at that point was treat her like I would with any other student and be supportive and push her along and push her in the right direction, and let her know that as the distance from when the tragedy occurred, she's going to get better as a student, and to keep pushing her to continue. She's too good of a student, too good of a person to stop going to school.
And I remember telling myself, how am I going to be able to do anything if I don't deal with what I'm going through mentally? Because the more you avoid trauma, the more it's going to come up in different ways in your life. It's going to come and remind you like, hey, I'm still here. You can ignore me, but I'm still here. And it's a lot of things that you're not really happy to deal with. You know, it's kind of like life telling you, you still have these things that you need to deal with that you've been ignoring.
To her credit, she persisted and she kept going. And then I would follow her when she was over at University of Maryland at Shady Grove. And I would still check in periodically and texts. Not so much phone calls, but it was more a text message or an email. How you doing? You're still in school? How many classes? What's going on? How's the family? How's AJ? I was in the background. You can't just stop in a situation like that and leave somebody hanging, because I was part of her support system. And I didn't know what else she had, who else she had in her a supportive role. So for me to do a quick couple of second text or email, how you doing, what's new? What kind of classes are you taking? How's life? How's family? How's AJ? Yeah, a little above and beyond, but it was well worth it.
I think with mental health now, I started to approach it. I think the very first step is to acknowledge that it's there. So it's different for everybody. Some people get in therapy, some people look for help right after an event, right after they feel that they need to. I was in avoidance for a couple years, and regardless of whoever told me that I needed to go to therapy or get help, I just went with my gut until it came to a point where I couldn't avoid it anymore. It was like an elephant in the room, and it was stopping me from doing things that used to be so easy. And I think once I removed all those distractions, and I have the job that I have now, and I'm starting to settle down and start to relax with what I have going on now. I'm not in survival mode anymore. Now as an adult, I start to acknowledge when things are maybe giving me anxiety, or they're triggering me, or I'll know when I need to rest, or I'll know that I don't need to do everything all the time. I'm starting to slow down and understand that I'm a human. And through the county, I've been able to open the door to getting therapy and looking into trauma therapy and EMDR, and it's a lot of things I didn't know about before that I'm starting to open the door to now that I feel will help me cope with what I have.
I really had a good understanding of the mental side of what Nicole was going to experience and what she was experiencing. We've seen a big increase in the number of students who are coming in and are saying, I do have a mental illness, I do need support. When I started the college, about 2/3 of our students were showing a learning disability. And the other 1/3 was they're deaf, they're blind, they have orthopedic injuries, mental illness, etc. Now it's completely different. And the students coming in saying they have a mental health issue, that's on the rise. So they're up there along with ADHD, ADD, and psychiatric problems, and learning disability. They're almost even across the board now. So because of that, we're very aware of what's going on with our students, and the behavioral interventions teams work on a regular basis to help students out. We have, through our Student Wellness Center, we have a grant. So we have a social resource program. We now have 3 social workers at the college under this grant. Now, they're not therapists, but they can do things on a social service side that we as counselors can't do. We know what needs to be done, but it's not part of our role. I have food insecurity. I have housing insecurity. I'm part in an abusive, I need to get out. I need emergency housing. I can't help with that kind of stuff. These folks can. And all of that combined, plus our check-ins behind the scenes, that helps the student deal with their mental health issues. And I think you're seeing this probably nationwide with colleges all over the country. It's just what we have to do today.
I think for anybody who's going through trauma or has a bunch of trauma, whether it's big or small, and being a college student, I think the most important thing is to understand that you're not alone. What makes it worse, what makes you feel more alone, is that you feel like you're alone. You feel like nobody can relate, like nobody knows, so you feel alone. And I think that's what makes trauma worse. And I just think the best thing to do as somebody who goes through trauma or is going through a traumatic experience is to understand that you're not alone, that it's okay to ask for help.